One of the most famous stories of that great Berditchever Rebbe, that ardent defender of Klal Yisrael, it's told in various forms, but it basically goes like this. One Erev Yom Noraim, when he would always try to have yichud with his Hasidim and ask them what they were going to daven for in Yom Noraim based upon their past tefillos, he turned to one of his Hasidim and he said, "Tell me, I don't believe that you're conversant with the tefillos of the Yom Noraim. So what did you ask God for last year?" To which the Chassid rather sheepishly replied, he said, "Rebbe, I feel so embarrassed to tell you this, but I turned to HaKadosh Baruch Hu and I said as follows." He said, "Chatasi avisi poshati. I know that I'm a sinner, Ribono Shel Olam. I have sinned deeply. I am so poor that I feel forced to work on Shabbos Kodesh. When I travel to other cities many times, I don't find any kind of source of kosher meat, so I eat treif. And I rarely look into a sefer, and even when I have a few moments to do so, I usually use it to nod back and go to sleep. But I then turned to Kadosh Baruch Hu last year and I said, but Almighty, you created the world, and look what you placed into the world. Suffering and hardships, sickness and pogroms. You created your people whom you swore to defend, and we find ourselves the victim of every imaginable enemy at each and every turn. And Ribono Shel Olam, I have a family to care for, and I don't feel that you particularly look upon my family with any kind of joy or sweetness. So I then turned to God and I said, so given this, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and that you're supposed to be the protector of Israel, and look how we suffer, let's make a deal. Let's cut a deal. I will forgive you, and you forgive me. To which the Rebbe replied to the Chassid, my gosh, you had the Ribono Shel Olam by his coattails, and you could have demanded that he send us Mashiach. It's a beautiful story, so moving, but what did the Berditchever base his response to the Chassid upon? I believe this week's Parsha. We know that when Moshe Rabbeinu is the victim of Lashon Hara spoken by his sister Miriam to his brother Aaron, HaKadosh Baruch Hu quickly runs to his defense and he says, how could you possibly speak of this man in this manner? B'chol Beisi Nemonu, why he is the most trusted servant in my entire palace. Pe'el pe'adar rabo, I speak to him man to man, mouth to mouth, and he's able to understand what I say to him. B'mara v'lo b'chinos, with immediate, distinct, clear interpretation, without any deciphering of riddles necessary. Usmunas Adonai yabit, and he looks at me as it were, with an ability to see my face. And at the end of his life, when HaKadosh Baruch Hu delivers his hesped, as it were, he describes Moshe Rabbeinu as one whose likeness is not to be found within the balance of Israel. Asher yeda'u Adonai ponim upon him, who has spoken to me face to face. Even according to the Ramban, able to understand my thoughts and my messages for him by the nuances of my face, as it were. But it wasn't always the case. In this week's Parsha, when HaKadosh Baruch Hu reveals himself to Moshe for the first time in the burning bush, Moshe moves closer to see what is going on. HaKadosh Baruch Hu instructs him, take off your shoes, for it's a holy place. I am the Lord of your father Amram and Avram and Yitzchak and Yaakov. And immediately, what is Moshe's reaction? Vayaster Moshe Panav, he masked his face. Ki yorei, for he was fearful, mehabit el Elohim, of looking to God. And comes along the Balatur and based upon a pasuk in Eov, and he says as follows. He says, Moshe made a mistake. She'ilo hoya mabit beziv ashchina baso chasneh, where Moshe to have looked directly at God's face at that moment in time, that was to be found within the burning bush. And he would have asked for and demanded mercy from HaKadosh Baruch Hu upon Israel. And he would have said to him, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, look at their suffering, remove it from them for posterity. Lo hoyu golem yoser, they never would have found themselves. We never would have found ourselves as a persecuted victim of every nation on the face of the globe. And they would have been brought into the land of Israel for eternity. But Moshe, understandably, was too frightened to look at God, to face off with him at that moment in time. Ultimately, he stands on behalf of our people, seeing to it that we are not destroyed no matter what we have committed vis-a-vis HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But at that moment of time, had he pulled and hung on to the coattails of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, demanding the bringing and granting of Mashiach, we would never, ever, ever have been the whipping boy of any other nation beyond Egypt. That's where the Berditchev got it from. Moshe Rabbeinu could do this, but according to the Berditcheva, so could people as small as ourselves do so no differently in our davening with the Ribbon Shalom at very special granted moments of time. We need seize upon those moments. We need to look at HaKadosh Baruch Hu, eye to eye, face to face, and say, Tata, Ribbon Shalom, isn't it time already? And isn't it? Have a wonderful Shabbos.